Hello, good morning and salam alaikum. My name is Jawwad Farid and I'm here to teach day one of our course on Fintech and financial innovation. Uh, welcome to the welcome to the group. So in terms of backgrounds, I have a, an interesting mix of exposures. My first degree was a bachelor's in computer science from FAST, which is where the technology piece in my profile comes in. Side by side with the technology piece, I also did a fellowship of the Society of Actuaries, which exposed me to models. And then, after working for a few years in very technically focused, very technically oriented roles, I realized that there were a number of issues with respect to my understanding of the business world, especially my ability to connect the dots. Um, I think my biggest question, the hardest question that I was asking myself and I wasn't able to get a clear answer was, why is it that certain businesses succeed while others fail? Why is it that we all see opportunities in and around technology despite having exposure, despite having expertise, despite having the most recent, the most cutting edge, the most bleeding edge of tools? There are businesses that do well and there are businesses that fall flat on their face. And that's where the MBA came in. So I specifically went to Columbia to see if I could find answer to those questions. I was very lucky, very fortunate that I got that chance. Now, to this mix and background, when you add spending 22 years as a serial founder and mentor, your lens, your view, your focus, your direction, your questions change. Now, when you look at opportunities, now when you look at areas of interest, I think you want to dig deeper. You want to make sure that what you're doing is data driven, is based on evidence, is based on hard facts, not based on gut feeling, emotions, or material that you read in print or on media. So when Dr. Sana and Dr. Hilal asked me to teach this course, I think the first question I asked myself was, why did I want to teach this course? It's nice being here at IBA. It's great teaching young, sharp, bright, intelligent people. But I think at a personal level, my big thing was, okay, what do I expect to achieve as an instructor, as a facilitator, as a teacher? What do I want from teaching this course? Given my background in models, in technology, and in business, there is a realization, and maybe part of this is coming from the fact that I've been a founder for multiple years. I think a lot of times we feel that some new model or some new technology has what it takes to change the world. But a lot of times, despite the fact that we have the ability to build great models, despite the fact that we have the ability to work with technology that looks like, that seems like magic, in the end, what really matters is our understanding of the underlying business. And my thought with respect to this specific course, and I think the reason why I said yes, was essentially I felt that there is a far deeper need to take a business driven look at the value that we can create in this specific space. I'm not a big fan of the word fintech. I think fintech, finance and technology, financial combination of technology, finance, technology, and innovation, these are all oversimplification. And the example that I give is, I've spent 30 years in financial services. I've worked with back office systems. I've worked with both the banking side, the brokerage side, and the insurance side. And part of that is mainly because of my exposure and my expertise as an actuary. I actually worked on what you would typically, traditionally call the fintech space with my first fintech startup. I was not the founder, I was not an employee, I was just a consultant trying to help them out, all the way back in 1997, 1998, when fintech, the word was not even in vogue or in fashion. Nobody had actually used the term. And then from 97, 98, from 2001 to 2020, I worked in this space. So this combination of finance and technology and innovation and disruption, right? I've lived this life for 20 years. And my primary takeaway, after doing everything from middle office to enterprise risk, from due diligence and valuations to treasury products and portfolio optimization, my key takeaway was that there is an enormous amount of complexity. There's opportunity, there's no denying the fact that there is opportunity, but there's also an enormous amount of embedded complexity built in this specific space and in this specific field. This complexity, this opportunity, what does this imply? What is the question that we're really trying to answer? And I think in my mind, the primary question I am trying to answer, that I hope that we will be able to answer together, is that while there is value, while there is opportunity, there is also a great deal of hype. And the problem with this hype is that, you could either change the world or you could turn this into a fad that has no real meaning or impact in the real world. And we've seen this before, right? We've seen this before in multiple trends in the past, where some new piece of newness comes along and we all get excited about it. We all think this is going to create significant impact. We all think it's going to change the world, and it does to some extent, but not along the lines of what we expected. So whether you're a founder, whether you're a scientist, whether you're a model builder, whether you're a business student, whether you're just a grad student trying to explore what does this field actually mean, my primary objective of teaching this course is to figure out a mechanism, a framework, a path, a view, which, honestly speaking, would be classified as cynical. So I want to take a somewhat cynical, but also somewhat realistic approach to evaluating, to assessing opportunities in this space, and then see where that takes us. Now, having that cynical and realistic approach has a few advantages. I've used it in the past to sort of decode or segregate application of financial modeling to startups and founders. I've used it for applying and building and creating enterprise risk models for the banking and the insurance industry, for demystifying algorithmic model building driven and built up upon market data. My hope and expectation is that together, over the next few weeks, we should be able to do the same thing with respect to the topic of fintech. Now, as I said earlier, I'm going to keep on saying this again and again. I really hate the word fintech. Not a fan. And I think the reason why I say this is it's not just limited to finance and technology or finance and technology and innovation. There are actually multiple dimensions to what we refer to by this terminology of fintech, right? First, obviously, is finance. So that's number one. Then there is technology. Then there is infrastructure. Then there is consumer behavior. Then there is data, models, and networks. Now, they look like, interesting choice of words. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. In reality, what we're talking about is 7 very complex, very deep dimensions coming together and interacting to identify areas where a possible opportunity exists to do some really interesting work. So what we're really saying is that our interest, our focus is actually in a limited space that exists somewhat here. This part is the part that we're interested in. But then by definition, if you bring 7 dimensions and you solve for an optimal solution across those 7 dimensions, by definition, that means that you're trying to solve a fairly complex problem. So going back to the statement I'd made earlier, that in the last 30 years of my professional life, nothing I've done in and around the intersection of finance, technology, and innovation has been easy. There's been a lot of pain and suffering and challenges and issues. This basically essentially validates the same concept. If we dig a little deeper, I said complex, broad, deep dimensions. If we dig a little deeper, where do you think the banking industry fits in within these 7 dimensions? So it fits in here, which is finance, also technology, also infrastructure, also consumer behavior, also data, also models, also networks. It's not, you can't box banking in one of these boxes. What about telcos? Telecommunication companies. So telcos, we'll start off with network, technology, infrastructure, some part consumer behavior, and a lot of data. Modeling, not as much. Finance, not as much, given our traditional understanding of telco. But you bring a telco into the space of mobile and digital wallets, and you're into finance. You add the ability to sell insurance policies through an SMS, you're into finance. You add the ability to lend money to your customers based on their mobile profiles, you're into both finance and models. So if you get a sense, it's your desire, your ability to look at it from a complex lens is a function of how deep your outlook is and what collection of products and services are you working off it. Let's take an example. Let's take a very simple example in the local context. If you look at payment data, right? Assume that you have a friend who comes to you and says, payment is really, really hot, lots of interaction, lots of engagement, lots of activity, lots of opportunity, enormous amount of future potential. And you say, okay, and then he says, okay, I'd like you to quit your well-paying job and come join me. So how would you assess this statement? Even if he doesn't want you to quit, he just comes to you for advice and says, I'm interested into payments. I think it's a hot area, lots of action, lots of activity happening in this space. Tell me, what's your read? Do you think this is going to fly or not? How would you assess that? So for our purposes, right, because we're based in Pakistan and our focus is we want to look at it from a local context point of view. For our purposes, we take a look at the State Bank's payment system report. They update this every quarter. The most recent report, which is what this table is based on, is essentially, I think it came out earlier this year, and that covers the July to September 2020 piece. I think the most recent report covering October to December 2020, which is the last quarter that's just passed, would most likely come up in the next few weeks. So now when you look at this report, what stands out? The period of study that we're looking at, and I think I want to emphasize this, is 15 months. In 15 months, what stands out? So I've sort of simplified it. I've done a simple growth calculation over this 15-month time frame, right? So the cumulative aggregate growth rate over this 15-month time frame from July of 2019 to September of 2020. And what stands out? What stands out immediately, that draws your eyes, is this figure here. There's 114% growth in one number. And which number is that? And that number is mobile banking. And that's its value. So the value that sort of passed through mobile banking, as per the SBP payment system report, jumped from 292 billion rupees to about 909. That's a 3x increase in numbers in a span of 15 months. How did that happen? What's driving that? And the interesting question I want to ask is, if you say it's about technology, if you say it's about banking, then why not internet banking? Why has mobile banking gone up by 114% over this 15-month period, or 3x? And why has internet banking, value processed through internet banking, has only jumped by about half as much, right? It's gone from 570 to about 1.08 trillion rupees, right? Just a 64% growth. Now, 64% growth is nothing to laugh at. It's a remarkable achievement. But what's driving this? Is it user growth? If you look at user growth, it's interesting, it's exciting. It's gone from, for internet banking, gone from 3.3 million users to 4 million users. For mobile banking, 6 million users to about 8 million users. So this is not as significant. User base hasn't grown up. User base hasn't doubled up. But volume has. Value has. What's driving that? So, unless and until you were on a different planet, one certain clear driver is COVID. So COVID-19 has certainly had an impact. So that's one. Two is smartphones. So this number is going up, adoption is going up, users are going up. We sort of getting more comfortable with it. Trust levels are going up, right? Three is the tech stack. And when I say the tech stack, the middleware within banking systems, middleware that sits on top of core banking platforms, now has the capacity, has the capability to sort of push transactions in a relatively easier fashion compared to prior solutions. And then with this, you add UX, which is user experience, and UI. So if I were to guess, I would basically say these are the four trends that have driven these figures and these numbers. Now, can we dig a little deeper when we talk about these trends? Can we understand what's driving these trends? So for this, we go back to actual transactions, actual touch points where as a customer, I interact and engage with my bank. So my most common query, the query that I'm most likely to ping on any given day is the balance query. How much money do I have in the bank? I have got to make a payment, to make a transfer. I'm just checking to make sure whether the payment that I was expecting has come through or not. A check has gone out, a check has cleared. Is there enough money in the bank for me to go out and do what I need to do? That's my most common query, right? And my question to you would be, if you look at your mobile banking app, if you look at your internet banking app, if you look at going to a branch, right? How long, how many efforts, how many taps, how many steps does it take you to get to this most often used, most often active engagement with your banking partner? So that's one. Second is your bank transfer. Third is the check deposit. Fourth is the check clearance. Fifth is the check withdrawal. Then there is something called an IBFT transfer, which is called an interbank fund transfer, which is a bank-to-bank transfer, an account-to-account transfer. And this happens more or less in real time, right? Now, IBFT or real-time gross settlement is not something which is new to Pakistan. But if you asked me to do an IBFT transfer in 2019, I would have struggled. If you asked me to do IBFT transfer in 2020 or in 2021, I can now do it in my sleep because that's been the most common transaction we've all used in the last 12 months. Next is a SWIFT transfer, which is an international wire transfer. So money going out cross-border from Pakistan to outside Pakistan or from outside Pakistan into Pakistan comes through the SWIFT network. Then there are credit card transactions. I really struggle with this, not on the local side, but more so on the international side. Salary transfer, bill payments, and tax payments. So these are my transactions. These are my touch points with my banking partner. Now, if I follow this, where do these transactions occur? So originally, this was just the branch, and then the branch was supplemented by the ATM. So I had manual and human tellers, and then I had automated tellers. So this was my primary engagement, primary touch point with my banking partners. So ATMs essentially came in our market in Pakistan in the early 90s. So I'd say 1993, 4, 5. That's the time frame when you started seeing ATM networks start to being rolled out by local banks. And this was followed by call center and IVR banking. Then that was followed by internet banking. And then finally, we have mobile banking. So across these choices, if this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, and this is 4. Across these 4 channels, which channel do you prefer to work with? If you want to do a balance query, where would you go? Would you go to the branch and say, here's my account number, could you please tell me how much money I have in my bank? Would you call the call center? Would you log into your laptop and look it up? Or would you just sort of sign in with biometrics on your mobile phone and look at this number? Take a guess. If I take my personal example, as an individual, in terms of lowest friction, my preferred choice is the mobile phone banking app. I have two banks that I work with. One is HBL and the other is DIB. I like working with DIB as a banking partner. There is stuff that needs to be done. They leave a lot to be desired, but I hate using their tech stack. So when it comes to using internet banking or mobile banking, I would rather use the HBL app. I do not like HBL as a banking partner, but I like their mobile app. Right? So that sort of creates an interesting paradox where my engagement, my interaction with the branch is a function of my relationship with the teller at the branch and the branch manager, right? So as long as that relationship is solid, I don't have a problem working with them. My bigger question is, how much time is going to take me to get to the branch? Is there going to be a queue? Is there going to be a waiting list? Are the people going to be waiting outside? Under the SOP process, there is a limited number of people that can be in the branch. Will I have to wait outside for the branch to sort of have space for me to go back inside or not? Can I just call the teller or call the branch manager and get my thing done? So that sort of drives the branch experience. Call center and IVR banking, I hate. In terms of preference, if I give a branch, let's say a 5 in terms of ease of use, experience and preference, the call center IVR banking experience would be a straight flat 0. Internet banking would be a 6 or a 7 in terms of preference. Certainly better than going to the branch and waiting outside. Just log into a machine and do what needs to be done. And mobile phone banking would be somewhere between an 8 and a 9. So if I do a quick poll of my students in the class, you'll find that this trend, this preference is actually not unique. Everybody hates call centers and IVR banking. There was a time when they were an improvement, they were a step up over your branch experience, but with internet banking and mobile banking, not anymore. And banks have not done, not just banks, the builders, the vendors of IVR solutions have not done much to facilitate, to assist, to make them friendly enough, to optimize your path, across the network, to the solution that you need, to solve the problem that you're having or you're facing at that specific point in time. So you'll find that this preference for mobile banking applications is actually not unique. It's actually quite common. It's a function of, how much trust you have with the security protocols in the app, with the bank, and your user experience with customer service with the bank if there are any problems and challenges. Now this trust, this trust dimension is another important element, another important part. And that's a function of, who are you? As a user, what defines you? Man or woman, male or female? Education. Which network are you? Are you on Telenor, on Jazz, on Uphone, on Zong, on PDCL? What is your phone like? So is it a new phone? Is it one of the smarter, sharper, faster phones with a stable OS, or you're on a phone that comes with a really crappy OS? Which generation do you belong to? How old are you? My parents are not comfortable at all with doing their banking on a smartphone, and we are not comfortable with them doing banking on their smartphone, right? My children are, very, very key. Another related question is, are you likely to use a mobile phone banking application if you're a man versus if you're a woman? Does just gender play a role or not? What about urban and rural users? In terms of transactions, in terms of access, in terms of reach, what kind of an impact does that create? So these are all factors that you dig into once you start looking in what's driving this shift that we saw here. So if we say that a combination of COVID-19, smartphones, tech stack, UX and UI has led to a 3-fold increase in the value that's processed through mobile banking apps in Pakistan, why are we not seeing the same amount of growth? Why are we not seeing the same shift in internet banking? The answer is not just COVID-19. It's not just the tech stack. It's a mixture of the access, reach, and convenience of a smartphone combined with the amount of time, effort banking entities, institutions have put in the user experience and user interface of their touch points with their customers. Case in point, we spoke about balance query on my favorite app, my favorite banking app, not my favorite app per se, my favorite banking app. A balance query on the HBL app is 2 taps. 1 tap to log in with biometrics, 1 tap for a right swipe to bring in your account application in. It's not the same for DIB, and it's certainly not the same on the internet banking experience. And both of them obviously are much more efficient and faster than your typical branch experience. So I think one of the questions that you want to ask is, if you're a challenger and you want to evaluate the current state of play, not just in the banking industry, but in the financial service industry, you're a consumer, you work with financial institutions, which is both banks and insurance companies, and together you also work with regulators, and the regulators cover not just the central bank from the monetary policy point of view, but also governance, which is the Security and Exchange Commission of Pakistan, and then also consumer protection, right, which is essentially making sure that your rights, your data, your privacy, and your money are safe and protected. So the regulators basically create or define requirements for capital, regulations for financial stability, initiatives that need to be supported and approved, not just within technology, but also within products, within market access, within reach and pricing. And given the fact that most financial institutions here are anywhere from 100 years to 50 years to 30 years to 20 years old, there's also questions with respect to how much advantage and benefit they have, both in terms of volume of deposits and customers and money, but also in terms of scale. So if you're a challenger who's coming in, and you want to challenge this current state of play based on a combination of technology, models and processes, who do you think regulation is going to favor? Who do you think regulation is going to favor? Regulation is going to favor the incumbents. It's not going to favor you. What about capital? Also the incumbent, because they've been raising for the last 20 and 30 years. What about volumes and scale? Also incumbent. So this essentially serves as a huge barrier to entry. And within this context, if you want to look at adoption of technology, of new initiatives, of solutions, of changes, of how we look at things and how we solve for problems, who would you bet on? Would you bet on a challenger, or would you bet on the existing players? Remember, there is this huge wall in front of the challengers. And to my mind, I don't see anything here that tells me, that indicates, that promises, that suggests that you will be able to break down or jump over this wall to make sure that you can get a slice of this pie, which is the consumer that is currently served by financial institutions. So this core thesis, that challengers do not have the capacity, not all challengers, not most challengers have the capacity to break down, to climb over, to circumvent this wall of capital, regulation, adoption, volume and scale that incumbents have built around them. This is a huge moat that protects the existing system. And the only way the system is going to change if the change comes from within. Comes from within the financial institution itself, or comes from regulators. Because they're driven by a desire to sort of improve the game, to sort of make sure that the system rises collectively. So why would a financial institution invest in a better way of doing things? The answer is this tree that you see here, right? Branch, then branch. So first branch, then branch and ATM, then call center and IBR. Sorry, my apologies. So branch and ATM, call center and IBR, internet banking, mobile phone banking. This balance query, how much do I have in the bank? What's the cost of addressing and answering that if you execute this in the branch? If you execute this in an ATM versus a call center versus internet banking versus mobile phone banking. Each of these transactions, the cost comes down as you walk down this path, as you walk down this tree, right? When you go from branch to mobile phone banking, there's a huge cost saving in terms of the amount that you need to allocate per transaction to recover the cost you invested in creating this infrastructure. So, to a large part, you will find that within the banking industry, change and initiatives are driven essentially, a lot of time, driven by cost efficiencies. Low cost would lead to a higher chance, a higher probability of a technology change and a technology solution being accepted by the banking industry. It's that or it's regulation. The only two drivers, so cost savings, cost efficiencies, or new regulation. So अब इस context में, when you sort of think in terms of how this comes together, if you want to sort of analyze this, if you want to sort of specialize in this, if you want to sort of read how the game is being played, what do you need? What are the key themes you need to be aware of? The key themes you need to be aware of is A, finance and financial institutions, that's one. B, regulation and governance framework. C, consumer personas and profiles. Once you have these three, once you have a deeper understanding of these three components, then you can think about strategy, change management, and evaluation and assessment. But without understanding these three, you are quite unfit for figuring out how the game would get played. And that's what makes this theme, that's what sort of creates this sense of unease that I have when somebody comes to me and says, I've got this great idea in the fintech space, and my first question to them is, okay, how much time have you spent with the financial service industry? It's not enough to build a model. It's not enough to invent a technology. It's not enough to define a process. You have to do all of that within the context of these three elements that we've spoken about. FI, finance and financial institutions, regulation and governance framework, consumer personas and profiles. Only then are you in a position to figure out how to use how to build, how to craft, how to create the right strategy that allow you to do well with this concept and this model. And it's not enough to understand this for one space. So, you say, I've figured it out for payments. No, that's not enough. You need to get banking, you need to get insurance, you need to get investment. You can focus on one specific area, but the nature of the beast, by definition, the problem is such that there is an enormous amount of engagement, interaction, crossover across the financial service industry. So if you get banking but don't get payments, if you get insurance but don't get banking, if you get both but don't get investments, if you get all of them but don't understand how alternate asset classes play into this, you will have issues, you'll have challenges. So when we talk about financial systems, right, we said finance, technology, innovation, processes, right? When if we talk about all of these elements, we're essentially talking about not one, but payments, 1, banking, 2, insurance, 3, investments, 4, brokerage, 5, alternate asset classes, 6, optimization, 7, risk transfer, 8, structuring, 9, trade finance, 10. These 10 areas, these 3 themes. To decode opportunities, to evaluate and assess opportunities in the fintech space, you need a combination of both key themes and systems. If you understand that, you already have an edge. So what's our game plan in this course? I think our game plan in this course is, I'm really keen on local context. I don't want to see numbers for Asia and Africa in your presentations. I want you to quote reports from the US, from Europe, or from GSMA. I want you to look at and tell me what is the local context. For example, we spoke about payment systems. So payment systems is, let me see. Our big number was, if you add, let's take a look at e-commerce, right? If you take a look at e-commerce last 12 months, what's the total volume processed? 10 plus 7 is 17, 17 plus 9 is 26, 26 plus 12 is 38. 38 billion rupees PKR, that's the total rupee volume that was transacted across the entire e-commerce network using cards. So how much is that worth? If you say within the local e-commerce context, 38 billion PKR was processed by the local internet payment gateways, local electronic card processing, local providers of payment solution, local integrators of payment processing on the internet, local vendors of online payment processing in Pakistan. If the number was 38 billion PKR, what's the industry revenue? The payment processing community or industry's revenue in Pakistan. What is that number? Is it 0.5% of this figure? Is it 1% of this figure? And that's just revenue, right? What about profitability? Do you have that answer? And that's the answer. That's the level of depth. That's the level of detail I want. 3, when you identify opportunities, you have to identify those opportunities in the local context with this impact assessment in mind. Please don't quote examples of how much global fintech is worth. Don't quote examples of how much global fintech funding has been raised. Talk to me about how does that translate into the local environment within this context. Talk to me about this in the local context. How does this fit in with respect to what we just discussed, with respect to the framework, with respect to this, state of play, this playbook that we've presented in front of you within the local context. That's the key area of interest. And then within that, what are the challenges, what are the solutions, what are the frameworks you would use, and real world cases. So we have a couple of cases that are international in nature because I think they make an interesting point. But outside of that, most of the work that we will do will be focused on the Pakistani environment and the Pakistani context. Case in point, one of my specializations is risk and portfolio optimization. And the picture, this exciting surface that you see here represents a graphical presentation of a trading algorithm that I wrote for portfolio optimization. Now, portfolio optimization. So now this algorithm for portfolio optimization essentially was written and back tested and driven by data from NASDAQ and NICE. That's a sideway presentation. If you want to take a different look, if you want to take a look at it from the top at the 10,000 views, it's the same image presented in a different perspective. My question to you is, it works for securities listed on NASDAQ and NICE. Will it work at PSX, at the Pakistan Stock Exchange? And my default answer, my honest answer, my upfront answer, without even thinking about it, is the most likely answer is no. So there are some models that you can import from outside and they may work in our market environment. Most models that we import from outside are likely to fail because they need to be tweaked, they need to be adjusted, they need to be refined. You have to figure out how to modify their genetic code to make them compatible with the local environment. And this is true for banking, for insurance, for digital cash, for cross-border trade, for credit, for customer scoring, for savings and investments, for data and network, for customer profile and personas, and for any other models and applications that you can think of and come up with. So with this, we'll stop here at this point in time. When we come back, we'll take a look at the banking industry with a similar lens that we've used for payment systems. We want to see what drives value within the banking industry, and then how that understanding of what drives value in the banking industry may make it possible for us to identify opportunities for creating value that exists at the intersection of finance, technology, innovation within banking. All right. So let's take a quick 10-minute break, and when we come back, we will resume at this specific point in time. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take those questions once we come back after the break. Thank you. Enjoy the break. What I want to do now is I'm going to take a quick look. I'm going to take a quick look at banking from a similar lens to what we did with payments, right? So when you looked at payments, ऊपर तो हम यहाँ पे थे, right? So we started off with some data, then we looked at transactions, then we looked at user experiences, then we looked at elements that drive trust, and then we looked at the state of play in that specific space. Now what I want to do is I want to take a look at value drivers within the banking industry, and I want you to keep that in the background with respect to understanding what kind of frameworks you want to use if you're looking at insurance or investments or securities or brokerage or trade finance or banking or other areas where there are opportunities for fintech. Okay? So now with banking, I think the 4 questions we want to address is what drives value within a bank, how do we model it, can we analyze it, and do we have a framework? And then within that, the big question comes that, what is banking? So banking there is one component that deals with investment and brokerage or third-party products. One component deals with treasury solutions. One that deals with wealth, borrowing and lending, payments, obviously, deposits, and financial security and stability, right? And then iske niche, within this, then you have relationship management, which sort of brings all of these products to your customer base, and that at a high level is what we look at banking. So what drives transition or change or adoption of new technology initiatives within the banking space? So 3 primary drivers हैं, 3 primary areas of focus हैं that lead to change. One is scale. So I want to improve my spreads, or I want to improve the size of my balance sheet. One is process. I want to be more efficient. I want to sort of head towards operational excellence, or this is a requirement that's come from the regulator and it's required for you to sort of maintain your banking license. And then a third driver is customers, right? I want to focus on a specific customer segment. Building that product would give me access to that segment. Building that product would make it possible for me to add more products in the future for that segment. And then फिर इसके बाद, when we talk about high level, core business lines are credit, जिसमें आपके पास 3 areas of focus हैं, corporate है, SME retail है, you have payments जिसमें domestic हैं, cross border हैं, and non-funded हैं, you have treasury जिसमें fixed income है, FX and equities है, and then you have your network जिसमें branch network, wealth management, financial security, and technology stack, right? So that's the high level profile. जब इसको आप जब balance sheet पे convert करते हैं, so that's what your model looks like. Your model says आपके पास assets हैं, liabilities हैं, उन दोनों के दरमियान में mismatch है, वो mismatch translate into gap, उस gap के basis पे risk आता है, फिर इसकी basis पे आप income generate करते हैं. Income is essentially expressed as a percentage of the spread that you earn between the amount that you've lent and the amount that you've borrowed and the cost between the two. उसकी basis पे profitability आती है, और फिर आपके अपने expenses हैं, और फिर आपकी multiple adjustments हैं that happen because you work in a specific model. And फिर इसकी basis आप cash flows model करते हैं, dividend discount करते हैं, equity valuation कर लेते हैं, right? That's like a valuation model. अब core activities क्या हैं आपकी? Core activities are essentially this: sources, selecting, processing, documentation, relationship management, collection, risk management, regulatory reporting, technology, funding, and liquidity management. और जो आपका value proposition है वो क्या है? कि आप products बेचते हैं to customers, certain service levels and quality, some relationship management, profitable growth, partnership mindset, supportive stance. Okay. Channels आपके पास क्या है? Branch है, ATM है, call center है, mobile banking और direct sales agent है. और relationship manager आपके essentially are branch managers or relationship managers allocated to customers. Then you have certain cost items, you have certain revenue items, and then you have your key partners. So this becomes your business model. So आपकी evaluation या performance metrics कैसे value किए जाते हैं? One element is volume, one element is margin, one element is revenue, before risk, cost to income, so the ratio between these two elements, the cost of risk, the exposure you've taken, and your average tax rate. और फिर इसकी बेसिस पे प्रॉफिट निकलता है और कैपिटल चार्ज निकलता है और इसकी बेसिस पे इकोनॉमिक प्रॉफिट निकलता है. दिस इज अ हाई लेवल प्रोफाइल ऑफ द बैंकिंग इंडस्ट्री फ्रॉम नॉर्थ अमेरिका एंड द यूएस, राइट. एंड ये जो आप ग्रिड्स देख रहे हैं, दीज आर बेसिकली how these numbers have changed from 2000, 2013 and 2020. So over the last 20 years, how has this transition happened? And you can see that volumes have gone up, margins have remained stable, risk costs have remained stable, but cost to income has improved because of efficiencies. Revenues have also gone up because scale has gone up. Average tax rate has come down, jiski basis pe profits have gone up, but capital charges have also gone up. And economic profits have basically doubled every 10 years, right? So ये आपके drivers of economic profit. आप इसको सब combine कर दें अगर आप, you put all of this together in one picture, then this is what the picture looks like. There is a fundamental business model, there are performance metrics, right? And there is a key drivers and components. ये आपकी स्टार्टिंग स्टेट है, ये आपकी एंड स्टेट है, और ये बीच में आपकी ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन है, राइट. सो दिस इज़ योर स्टार्टिंग बैंक, सॉरी दिस इज़ योर स्टार्टिंग बैंक एंड दिस इज़ योर एंडिंग बैंक. तो हमारा सवाल क्या है? हमारा सवाल ये कि what drives adoption given this background, given this context, given this sort of high level, super concise and restricted and simplified and crude review of the banking industry. What drives technology adoption in the banking industry? So एक is scale, एक is access, and एक is operational excellence. अब जब आप स्केल की बात करते हैं, प्रोसेस एक्सेलेंस की बात करते हैं, या कस्टमर सेगमेंट्स की बात करते हैं, तो व्हाट डज इट एक्चुअली मीन? सो कस्टमर सेगमेंट मीन्स कि आपने एक नया सेगमेंट ऐड कर दिया, पोजीशन या डोमिनेंस ऐड कर दी, नई प्रोडक्ट्स बनाई, या जो आप पहले एग्जिस्ट नहीं करती थी अब एग्जिस्ट करती हैं, पहले नहीं बेचते थे अब बेचते हैं, मार्केट नीश टेस्ट की, या ओवरऑल अपना नेटवर्क इफेक्ट इम्प्रूव किया, राइट. दिस इज बाइंग कस्टमर्स. बाइंग स्केल इज रेवेन्यू बढ़ाओ, कॉस्ट लोअर करो. बैलेंस शीट का साइज ऑन कॉस्ट ऑफ फंडिंग एंड डील फ्लो उसको इम्प्रूव करो. ऑपरेशनल सिनर्जीज को रैशनलाइज कर लो, एंड कॉस्ट ऑफ कंप्लायंस एंड ओवरहेड को कम कर लो. प्रोसेस एक्सेलेंस इज बेसिकली आइदर टेक्नोलॉजी, प्रोडक्ट्स और टीम मेंबर्स. विद इन दिस फ्रेमवर्क व्हाट यू वांट टू लुक एट इज के हमने कहानी स्टार्ट की थी यहाँ से, राइट. वी स्टार्टेड हियर कि व्हाट ड्राइव्स वैल्यू विद इन अ बैंक, एंड आवर थीसिस इज के एक इज what is it that the bank does at a high level, what drives adoption of new technology, new initiatives, exploration and experimentation within the banking world, what are the core business lines, what's the underlying business model, how does that business model translate into specific activities, and then within each of these activities, where are there opportunities for improvement. What are the metrics that we use for evaluating performance of a bank, and how would we possibly use all of this together to evaluate the impact of a new initiative, a new technology, a new innovation within the banking industry, right? That's the high level framework, and that's the same framework you have to apply if you're working in insurance, in brokerage, in securities, in trade finance, और इन अदर एरियाज जहाँ पे फाइनेंस, टेक्नोलॉजी, इनोवेशन और नेटवर्क्स का इंटरैक्शन, इंगेजमेंट और ओवरलैप होता है. आई वांट टू डू अ क्विक रियलिटी चेक, राइट, एंड वील डू मोर ऑफ दीज एक्सरसाइजेज एज वी गो फॉरवर्ड. आज इज द फर्स्ट एक्सरसाइज. As part of this first exercise, I want you to dig out data. So everybody's made a group. I'm assuming everybody's made a group. Let's see. And everybody's picked an area of focus. So let's see. Ifra and Fahad are working on banking. Midhat and Mariam, I don't know what you're working on. Zara and Alishma are working on alternate asset class and we have no other group. So हमारे पास 6 लोग तो group बना चुके हैं. We have 2 more people in the class who haven't made a group. कौन बच गया? मुजम्मिल साहब आप अकेले हैं और एहसन and मुजम्मिल, do you guys want to work together?
Yes, sir. Yes. Portfolio optimization.
एक मिनट, कौन बच्चा है वेटिंग रूम के अंदर? Sorry. Okay. So Mariam's back. All right. So what I want you to do is I want to dig out some data and some numbers, and the field that that we've identified that I had on my list. I had bank assurance, I had mutual fund, I had mobile money, I had PSX, which is again on the investment security side. I had investor growth. So PSX volumes, investor growth, right? This is portfolio optimization ki team. And then alternate assets was I think one of the groups. अगर आपने कोई एरिया ऑफ फोकस पिक नहीं किया था उसको पिक कर लें, जिसमें बैंक एश्योरेंस, म्यूचुअल फंड्स, मोबाइल मनी इज बेसिकली योर टेलको मनी, राइट? तो इजी पैसा लगा लें. एंड देन जैज कैश, एंड देन देयर इज यू पे, एंड देन देयर इज एवरीबॉडी एल्स, राइट? एंड दिस प्लस टेलको एवरेज रिकरिंग एवरेज रेवेन्यू पर यूजर, राइट? यहाँ पे आ गया आपके पास. So what I want you to do is I want you to just as हमने यहाँ से डेटा निकाला था for State Bank's payment system report, the first thing I want you to do is dig out data in that space that will possibly identify areas of interest and opportunities, right? And then once you've done this, then the next step is, if you remember the framework that we used earlier, okay, transaction, channels and profile. So जैसे हमने ये ग्रिड बनाई हुई है for transactions, channels and profiles for the banking/payment systems world, ये आप ग्रिड बना लें अपने पास. So what you're doing is आप डेटा निकाल लें, डेटा को आप एक्सेल में डाल दें, डेटा को आप एक्सेल में निकाल लें, और फिर उसके बाद जो है जिस स्पेस में आप काम करें उस स्पेस के अंदर आइडेंटिफाई ट्रांजैक्शंस, आइडेंटिफाई चैनल्स एंड प्रोफाइल्स. And again, the idea is what? The idea is, जैसे हमने framework इस्तेमाल किया था for payment systems, we want to answer a couple of simple, very basic, very high-level questions. And those questions are, based on this data, where are the opportunities? In your mind. Not in my mind, but in your mind. आपके ज़हन में opportunity कहाँ है, right? And उसका impact क्या है? So for example, अगर आपको याद हो हमने पेमेंट सिस्टम्स में क्या किया, हमने कहा पेमेंट सिस्टम कहा कि पेमेंट सिस्टम्स में बेस्ड ऑन द डेटा दैट वी हैव फ्रॉम स्टेट बैंक ऑफ पाकिस्तान, एंड दिस इज अ हाई लेवल इनिशियल 10,000 मीटर व्यू, वी सेड के 38 बिलियन PKR is the total volume. So if 38 billion PKR is the total volume, और उसका आप 1% कमाते हैं, so that's 380 million. अगर आप आधा % कमाते हैं, then that's 140 million, and if you have 10 players, then that gives you 38 million per player. If you have 10 players here, that gives you 14 million per player. And our take was that this number is not as impressive or as interesting or as enticing as a lot of people think, right? So we sort of dug holes in the payment system opportunity. So what I want you to do is I want you to do exactly the same thing. Dig out data, dig out the numbers, dig out the math, get a sense of where the opportunity is, what does it look like, and in your mind, if there's a ballpark estimate that you have, कि इस opportunity का size क्या होगा. देखिए, portfolio optimization आपके पास जो पहला सवाल है ना, वो सवाल ये है कि जो PSX है, पाकिस्तान स्टॉक एक्सचेंज है, राइट, उसमें वॉल्यूम कितना है और नंबर ऑफ इन्वेस्टर्स कितने हैं. तो हाउ हैव दीज नंबर्स चेंज्ड. आपको बहुत सारा डेटा मिल जाएगा. एक मुफाप की साइट है, MUFAP. सो यू शुड बी एबल टू गेट सम डेटा अबाउट द इंडस्ट्री, एटलीस्ट द म्यूचुअल फंड इंडस्ट्री फ्रॉम देयर, राइट. कुछ डेटा आपको PSX से मिल जाएगा, कुछ डेटा आपको SECP से मिल जाएगा. सो व्हाट यू नीड टू डू इज, आपके पास 20 मिनट है. 20 मिनट में यूजिंग गूगल सर्च, using the primary sites in that specific space, dig out the primary industry metrics that you can get your hands on. जैसे मैंने आपके लिए यहाँ पे तैयार किया ना, कहाँ गया वो, ये तैयार किया था आपके लिए. दिस केम फ्रॉम द स्टेट बैंक पेमेंट सिस्टम रिपोर्ट. तो आप मुझे कुछ ट्रेंड्स निकाल के दे दें. दे डोंट हैव टू बी ऑन अ क्वार्टरली बेसिस, दे कुड बी ऑन अ ईयरली बेसिस. आई वांट टू सी सम नंबर्स दैट यू कैन जनरेट दैट एक्चुअली पॉइंट टू हार्ड डेटा फ्रॉम योर एरिया ऑफ इंटरेस्ट. ओके, एक एलिमेंट. फिर सेकंड एलिमेंट ये कि जब आप पोर्टफोलियो ऑप्टिमाइजेशन की बात करते हैं तो दैट इज बेसिकली अ मॉडल. यही मॉडल था ना जो हमने कहा था, कहाँ गया है मॉडल, वेयर इज इट, बिफोर बैंकिंग वी डिस्कस दिस, देयर वी गो. आप ये कह रहे हैं कि जी हम पोर्टफोलियो ऑप्टिमाइजेशन मॉडल बनाना चाहते हैं. तो अगर आप मॉडल बनाएंगे तो डेटा चाहिए आपको. तो डेटा क्या चाहिए, ट्रेडिंग डेटा चाहिए, प्राइस डेटा चाहिए. तो ये ट्रेडिंग और प्राइस डेटा इट कम्स फ्रॉम व्हाट वी कॉल लिक्विड सिक्योरिटीज़. तो कितनी लिक्विड सिक्योरिटीज़ हैं PSX के ऊपर, you know, where the trading volume on a daily basis is above a certain amount, and which is where I said कि if you go to PSX, so PSX का overall इस वक्त वॉल्यूम कितना है, ये आपके पास चीज़ आ जाएगी. फिर आप देखेंगे कि जी ब्रोकरेज में कितने कस्टमर्स हैं आपके पास. सो इंडिविजुअल इन्वेस्टर्स कितने हैं जो इस्तेमाल करेंगे. फिर यू ऑल्सो हैव टू थिंक कि पोर्टफोलियो ऑप्टिमाइजेशन हम कहाँ अप्लाई करेंगे, किसको बेचेंगे. Are you going to sell it to the banking industry, to the treasury group, to investors, to mutual funds, or to retail investors? Okay, so यहाँ जो आपने ग्रिड बनाई थी ना यहाँ पे कि ये आपकी ट्रांजैक्शंस हैं. तो इन योर स्पेसिफिक स्पेस पोर्टफोलियो ऑप्टिमाइजेशन में क्या ट्रांजैक्शन होंगी, फिर वो किस चैनल के थ्रू काम करेंगी, एंड व्हाट अबाउट योर कस्टमर्स. आपका कस्टमर्स का प्रोफाइल कितना इंपॉर्टेंट है, आप ट्रस्ट कैसे क्रिएट करेंगे. आई वॉन्ट टू हियर बहुत अच्छा मार्केट है, बहुत बड़ा मार्केट है, बहुत सारे लोग हैं, बहुत सारे पैसे बनेंगे, बहुत सारा काम हो जाएगा. आई वांट टू सी दैट. आई एक्चुअली वांट टू सी हार्ड डेटा. व्हाट डज द अंडरलाइंग मार्केट लुक लाइक, and then within that underlying market, where are the opportunities for improvement, and what do you think, in your opinion, based on that data set, is the size of that market in terms of money that you will make, or the opportunity that this business or this idea or this concept or any innovation in this field will generate. अच्छा, अब आपके पास टाइम बहुत कम है और मुकाबला बहुत सख्त है. So what's the expectation? The expectation is that you spend 15 minutes. Don't spend any more than 15 minutes to dig out as much data as possible. और ये आपको दोनों को काम करना पड़ेगा, एक आदमी नहीं काम कर सकता. सो डेटा निकालें, डेटा में क्विकली 5 से 7 मिनट लगाएं टू रिव्यू इट, पुट दैट, टेक अ स्क्रीनशॉट, टेक अ डंप, पुट इट इन एक्सेल, डू व्हाटएवर वर्क्स फॉर यू, पुट इट टुगेदर इन द फॉर्म ऑफ अ short PowerPoint presentation. And PowerPoint presentation is only for the sake of presenting it. It doesn't have to look nice. All I want to see are the key data points. तो data points निकाल लें और intervention identify करें कि issues क्या हैं, opportunities कहाँ हैं, और फिर उसके बाद नेक्स्ट 10 मिनट में फिगर आउट कि आप इसको प्रेजेंट कैसे करेंगी. सो 15, 5 और 10, so that's about 30 minutes. So it's 11:04. I'll give you till 11:40 to come back. 11:40 you come back, and I think there are about 4 groups now. Each group does a high level first pass on what they've picked, what they've identified, and what their take on the market is. Okay, are we good?